The blood on his buckskin pants had dried to a dark brown by the time Emma Ashford first saw the mountain man sprawled across the doorway of her makeshift clinic in Rock Springs, Wyoming territory. And she knew immediately that if she did not act fast, he would lose the leg entirely. "Help me get him inside," Emma called to her assistant, Mary, a young woman who had been learning the nursing trade from Emma for the past 6 months. Together, they grabbed the unconscious man under his massive arms and dragged him across the threshold. His weight was considerable, all hard muscle and bone, and Emma could feel the strength in him even in his current state. The year was 1876, and Rock Springs was a rough mining town filled with men seeking their fortunes in the coal deposits that ran beneath the harsh Wyoming landscape. Emma had arrived 2 years prior after training in Philadelphia, one of the few women who had managed to receive formal medical education through a progressive nursing program. She had come west seeking purpose, wanting to help those who had no access to proper medical care. What she found was a town full of desperate men, mining accidents, shootings, and more broken bones than she could count. This man was different from the miners she usually treated. His clothing spoke of months, maybe years, spent in the mountains. Thick leather boots, worn but well maintained. A coat made from bear fur lay beneath him, probably what his companions had used to transport him down from wherever he had been injured. His face was weathered but handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw covered in a thick beard and hair that fell past his shoulders in dark brown waves. "What happened to him?" Emma asked the 2 men who had carried him in, both looking nearly as rough as their injured companion. "Rocks slide up in the Wind River Range," one of them said, removing his hat respectfully. "We was trapping beaver when the whole mountainside seemed to give way. Caught his leg under a boulder. Took us near 3 hours to get him free, then 2 days to get him down here. Name's Aiden Morgan, best trapper in these parts." Emma did not waste time with further questions. She could see the leg was badly broken, the left one bent at an unnatural angle below the knee. She cut away the buckskin to reveal the injury, and her stomach tightened at what she saw. The bone had not broken through the skin, which was fortunate, but the swelling was severe and she could see the dark purple bruising that indicated significant damage. "Mary, I need hot water, clean linens, and the laudanum from the cabinet. Quickly now." Emma's voice was steady despite her concern. She had set broken bones before, many times, but never one quite this severe on a man quite this large. The 2 trappers stood awkwardly near the door until Emma waved them away. "You have done your part. Come back tomorrow to check on him." As they left, Emma began her examination in earnest. She ran her hands carefully along the leg, feeling for the break, assessing the damage. The man groaned but did not wake, which was probably for the best. What she was about to do would be excruciating. Mary returned with the supplies, and together they worked to clean the leg and prepare for the setting. Emma had studied under some of the best physicians in Philadelphia, men who had reluctantly accepted that a woman could be just as skilled in medical matters as any man. She knew what needed to be done. "Hold his shoulders," Emma instructed Mary. "When I set this bone, he may wake, and if he does, he will thrash. I cannot have him moving while I work." Emma positioned herself at the foot of the table where they had laid Aiden Morgan. She took a deep breath, said a quick prayer, and then pulled hard on the leg while simultaneously pushing the displaced bone back into alignment. The crack as it moved back into place was audible, and the mountain man's eyes flew open with a roar of pain that shook the windows. "Hold him," Emma shouted, maintaining her grip on the leg as she worked to ensure the bone was properly set. Aiden thrashed once, twice, his massive strength nearly throwing Mary aside, but then Emma met his eyes. "Be still," she commanded, her voice firm but not unkind. "I am helping you. The bone is set, but if you move now, I will have to do it again." Something in her tone, or perhaps the clarity in her green eyes, must have reached through his pain because Aidan stopped moving. His chest heaved with labored breaths and sweat poured down his face, but he held still as Emma finished her work. She splinted the leg carefully, binding it with wooden slats and strips of clean linen, wrapping it tightly enough to hold everything in place but not so tight as to cut off circulation. "Mary, the laudanum," Emma said quietly, and her assistant brought the small bottle. Emma measured out a dose and held it to Aidan's lips. "Drink this. It will help with the pain." His eyes, she noticed, were a striking shade of blue, like the Wyoming sky on a clear winter day. They studied her face as he swallowed the medicine, and she saw intelligence there along with the pain. Then his eyes drifted closed and his breathing deepened as the laudanum took effect. "Will he keep the leg?" Mary asked quietly. "I believe so, if infection does not set in. The next few days will tell." Emma wiped her hands on a cloth and looked down at her patient. He was indeed a mountain man through and through, his body bearing the scars of a hard life lived in harsh conditions. But she had saved his leg. She was certain of that much. Over the next 3 days, Emma barely left Aidan's side. She monitored him constantly for signs of fever, changed his dressings, and administered laudanum when the pain grew too intense. Mary helped when she could, but Emma took the night shifts herself. Dozing in a chair beside the bed where Aidan lay on the 4th morning, he woke fully for the first time since the setting. Emma was changing the dressing on his leg when his voice, rough from disuse, broke the silence. "You are the nurse," he said. It was not a question. "I am," Emma replied without looking up from her work. "And you are fortunate to still have this leg, Mr. Morgan. Another day in the mountains and gangrene would have set in. My friends told me a woman doctor saved me before they left. I am not a doctor, merely a nurse, but I have training enough to set bones and treat injuries." Emma finished wrapping the fresh bandage and finally met his eyes. "How do you feel?" "Like a mountain fell on me," Aidan said, and there was a hint of humor in his voice despite the pain she knew he must be feeling. "But alive, thanks to you. You will need to stay off that leg for at least 6 weeks, possibly longer. The bone must heal completely or you will be left with a limp or worse." Aidan's expression darkened. 6 weeks? I cannot stay in town that long. Trapping season does not wait." "Then you will trap with one leg," Emma said sharply, "because if you put weight on this one before it is healed, you will do permanent damage. I did not work for hours to save your leg only to have you ruin it through foolish stubbornness." Their eyes met and held. Emma refused to look away, refused to be intimidated by this mountain of a man, even if he was her patient. She had dealt with stubborn men before, miners and cowboys who thought they knew better than medical science. She would not bend on this. To her surprise, Aidan's stern expression softened slightly. "You have fire in you," he observed. "I can see why you survived out here. This town is not easy on anyone, especially women alone." "I am not alone. I have Mary, and the people of this town need medical care. That is purpose enough." Emma turned to put away her supplies. "Now you need to eat something. You have had nothing but water and laudanum for days. Mary is preparing soup." Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Emma would check on Aidan first thing each morning, examining his leg for any signs of infection or improper healing. She would change his dressings, bring him meals, and in the evenings, after her other patients had been seen to, she would sit with him and they would talk. At first, the conversations were brief and functional. He would ask about his leg's progress. She would report on the healing. But gradually, as Aidan grew stronger and the acute pain faded to a dull ache, their talks grew longer and ranged over more subjects. Emma learned that Aiden had come west 5 years earlier from Missouri, fleeing the aftermath of the Civil War and the painful memories it had left behind. He had lost his family, his home, and nearly his mind before finding solace in the mountains. Trapping had given him purpose, and the solitude had helped heal wounds that went deeper than any physical injury. "There is something about the mountains," Aiden said one evening as Emma checked his splint. "Up there, nothing matters except survival. Will you find food? Can you stay warm? Will you see tomorrow? It strips away all the nonsense that clutters up regular life." "But it is lonely, surely," Emma said, looking up from her work. "Sometimes," Aiden admitted, "but I learned to prefer loneliness to the company of those who remind me of what I lost." Emma understood that sentiment more than she cared to admit. She too had fled to Wyoming, though her reasons were different from his. She had left behind a comfortable life in Philadelphia, a potential marriage to a wealthy merchant who saw her education as an amusing hobby rather than a calling. When she had insisted on actually practicing nursing, working with the poor and injured rather than simply hosting tea parties, he had given her an ultimatum. She had chosen her work, and she had never regretted it, even on the hardest days. "What about you?" Aiden asked. "What brings a trained nurse all the way out to Rock Springs? This is about as far from civilization as you can get." "That is precisely why I came," Emma replied, finishing with the splint and sitting back. "In Philadelphia, there were dozens of doctors, nurses, hospitals. Here there is only me. These people, the miners and their families, the cowboys, the trappers like yourself, you have no one else. I can make a real difference here." "And you have," Aiden said quietly. "You saved my leg. That is my livelihood, my life. Without it, I would be nothing." Emma met his eyes and saw genuine gratitude there, along with something else she could not quite name. It made her pulse quicken in a way that was distinctly unprofessional, and she stood quickly, smoothing her skirts. "You should rest now," she said, more curtly than she intended. "The leg is healing well, but you still need sleep for your body to repair itself." As she turned to go, Aiden's hand caught her wrist, gentle despite his obvious strength. "Emma," he said, using her given name for the first time. "Thank you, truly." The warmth of his hand on her skin sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "You are welcome, Mr. Morgan," she managed, then slipped free and retreated to her own small room at the back of the clinic. That night, Emma lay awake longer than usual, thinking about the mountain man in her care. It was dangerous to develop feelings for a patient, she knew that. It compromised her judgment and professionalism. But there was something about Aiden Morgan that called to something deep inside her. Perhaps it was the gentleness she saw in him despite his rough exterior, or the way he looked at her as if she were a real person rather than just a woman to be dismissed or controlled. As the weeks passed, Aiden grew stronger. He began sitting up in bed, then moving to a chair. Emma taught him exercises to keep his good leg strong, and to carefully move the joints of his injured leg without putting weight on it. He was a diligent patient once he understood the importance of the healing process, and Emma found herself looking forward to their sessions together more than she should. The clinic was located on the main street of Rock Springs, a dusty thoroughfare lined with saloons, general stores, and the company offices that ran the mining operations. Emma's clinic was modest, just 3 rooms, one for examinations and treatment, one for patients who needed to stay overnight, and her own small living quarters. But it was clean and well organized, an island of order in the chaotic frontier town. Other patients came and went during Aiden's recovery. Emma treated a miner with a crushed hand, a child with fever, a woman struggling with a difficult pregnancy. Through it all, she was aware of Aiden's presence, the way his eyes followed her as she worked, the concern in his voice when she came back, exhausted from a difficult night delivering a stillborn baby. "You carry too much," he said one morning after she had returned from that particular tragedy, her eyes red from tears she had shed with the grieving mother. "This is my work," Emma replied, washing her hands in the basin. "I chose this life. That does not mean you must bear it alone." Aidan had graduated to crutches by then, and he stood awkwardly, balancing on his good leg. "You care for everyone in this town. Who cares for you?" The question caught Emma off guard. She turned to face him, seeing genuine concern in those blue eyes. "I manage well enough. Do you?" Aidan moved closer, his movements still careful but more confident than they had been. "I have been watching you, Emma. You give everything to everyone else. You sit with dying miners, you hold the hands of frightened children, you work through the night more often than not. But I have never seen anyone offer you comfort in return." "I do not need comfort," Emma said, but her voice lacked conviction. The truth was, she was tired, bone tired. She had been running on determination and coffee for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to truly rest. "Everyone needs comfort," Aidan said gently. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, the gesture so tender that Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. "I cannot," she whispered. "You are my patient, it would not be proper." "I have been thinking," Aidan said, not moving away, "that I have spent 5 years running from people, from connection, from anything that might hurt me again. And then a mountain fell on me and brought me here to you. Maybe that was not an accident." "You do not believe in Providence," Emma said, remembering one of their earlier conversations. "I did not," Aidan corrected. "But you make me want to believe again. In Providence, in second chances, in the possibility that maybe I could have more than just survival in my life." Emma's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Aidan, You do not have to say anything now," he interrupted gently. "I know I am still healing. I know you have responsibilities. But I want you to know that when I am well enough to leave this clinic, I would like your permission to court you properly. If you would allow it." The words hung in the air between them, full of possibility and promise. Emma had told herself she had no time for romance, that her work was enough to fill her life. But standing there, looking into Aidan's eyes, she realized that was a lie. She had been lonely too, just as lonely as he had been in his mountains, but surrounded by people instead of solitude. "I would like that," she said finally, and the smile that broke across Aidan's face was like sunrise over the mountains. Their courtship was necessarily slow, constrained by Aidan's recovery and Emma's work. But in the quiet moments between patients, they found time for each other. Aidan began helping around the clinic as he grew stronger, organizing supplies, keeping the fire going, even learning to prepare some of the simple remedies Emma used regularly. He had a quick mind and a gentle touch, and Emma was surprised to discover how helpful he could be. One afternoon, nearly 2 months after Aidan's injury, Emma unwrapped the splint completely for the first time. She examined the leg carefully, running her fingers along the bone, checking for any irregularities in the healing. "It is solid," she said finally, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "The bone has knit properly. You will need to be careful for a few more weeks, gradually putting weight on it, but I believe you will make a full recovery." Aidan let out a breath she had not realized he was holding. "I can walk again. Really walk. With care, yes. No running, no climbing mountains quite yet, but normal walking should be possible within a week or 2. Emma looked up at him, smiling. "You have been an excellent patient, Mr. Morgan, better than I expected, truth be told." "I had excellent motivation," Aidan said, catching her hand. "Both to heal and to stay here as long as possible." Over the next week, Aidan learned to walk again. It was a slow, sometimes frustrating process. The leg was stiff from disuse and weak from the injury. But Aiden was determined, and Emma was there every step, literally and figuratively, supporting him when he wobbled, encouraging him when he grew discouraged, celebrating each small victory. The first time he walked across the clinic without crutches, Emma could not contain her joy. She threw her arms around him without thinking, and he caught her, holding her close. For a moment they stood like that, and then Aiden tilted her face up to his and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, careful and sweet, but it sent warmth flooding through Emma's entire body. When they parted, both were breathless. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," Aiden admitted, his hand still cupping her cheek. "I have wanted you to," Emma confessed, then laughed at the boldness of her own admission. "What are we doing, Aiden? Your life is in the mountains and mine is here." "I have been thinking about that," Aiden said. He led her to sit down, keeping her hand in his. "My trapping partners brought news when they came to check on me last week. The beaver populations are declining. Too many trappers, not enough animals. The life I knew, it is ending. Men like me, we are becoming obsolete." "What will you do?" Emma asked, concerned. "I have money saved enough to buy land. I was thinking I could build a ranch somewhere between here and the mountains. Close enough to town that you could still run your clinic, but far enough out that I could have the space I need. Room for cattle, maybe some horses." He looked at her intently. "Room for a family if you would consider it." Emma's breath caught. "Are you asking what I think you are asking?" "I am not asking yet," Aiden said with a slight smile. "That would not be proper, as you like to say. I have not courted you nearly long enough. But I am telling you my intentions, Emma Ashford. I intend to build a life here. I intend to court you properly. And if you will have me, I intend to marry you and spend the rest of my days making sure you never regret it." Tears sprang to Emma's eyes, but they were happy tears. "That is quite an intention, Mr. Morgan. I am a man who commits fully to things once I set my mind to them," Aiden said. "I committed to surviving in the mountains for 5 years, and I did. Now I am committing to building a life with you if you will let me." "I will let you," Emma whispered, and kissed him again. True to his word, Aiden began his courtship properly once he was fully mobile again. He found work in town, helping at the freight office, using his knowledge of the mountain trails to advise on the best routes for supply wagons. It was not glamorous work, but it was honest and it kept him near Emma. He took her on walks through the town and out into the surrounding countryside when she had time. They attended the occasional dance at the town hall, though Aiden was still careful with his leg. He brought her wildflowers from the foothills and helped her plant a small garden behind the clinic. In the evenings, he would come to the clinic and they would sit together, talking about their days, their dreams, their pasts. Emma learned more about the man Aiden had been before the war, the farm boy from Missouri who had loved his family and his land. She learned about the horrors he had seen, the friends he had lost, the way he had returned home to find everything he loved burned to the ground. She understood then why he had fled to the mountains, why he had chosen isolation over the risk of losing people again. In turn, she shared her own story more fully. The pressure she had faced in Philadelphia society, the expectations that she marry well and give up her ambitions, the joy she had found in nursing, the sense of purpose it gave her, the fear she sometimes felt, being a woman alone in a rough frontier town, and the strength she had discovered in herself to continue despite that fear. "You are the strongest person I have ever met," Aiden told her one evening as they sat on the bench outside the clinic, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. "Not just physically, though you have stamina I cannot match, but in spirit. You face suffering and death every day, you give everything you have to people who often cannot pay you, and you never seem to lose hope." "I lose hope sometimes," Emma admitted. "When a patient dies despite my best efforts, or when I see how much suffering there is and how little I can do to prevent it. But then someone like you comes along, someone I can actually help, and it reminds me why I do this." "Speaking of which," Aidan said, turning to face her more fully, "there is something I want to discuss with you, something important." Emma felt her heart skip. They had been courting for nearly 4 months now, and she had been wondering when or if he would take the next step. "What is it?" "I found land," Aidan said, his eyes bright with excitement. 20 miles northeast of here, where the foothills begin. There is a creek that runs year-round, good grass, and a box canyon that would be perfect for cattle. The price is reasonable, and I have enough saved for both the land and materials to build a house." "That sounds wonderful," Emma said, though her heart sank slightly. 20 miles was not far by frontier standards, but it would make running the clinic difficult. Aidan must have seen something in her expression because he quickly continued. "I know your work is here. I would never ask you to give that up. But what if there was a way to expand what you do? The ranches and homesteads outside of town, they have no medical care at all. If we built a house large enough, you could have a clinic there too, maybe go into town 2 or 3 days a week for the serious cases, but also serve the outlying areas." Emma considered this. It was true that the scattered ranches and farms had virtually no access to medical care. Women gave birth without assistance, injuries went untreated, illnesses that could easily be cured in town turned fatal out in the country. The idea of being able to help those people too was appealing. "You have thought about this carefully," she observed. "I have thought about little else for weeks," Aidan admitted. "I want to build a life that works for both of us, Emma. Not one where you have to sacrifice your calling for me, or where I have to give up the space and freedom I need. I think we can have both if we are creative about it." "It would be a lot of work," Emma said slowly. "Building a ranch, maintaining a clinic, traveling back and forth to town." "It would," Aidan agreed, "but we would be doing it together. And I think we would be good at it, you and I. We are both hard workers, both committed to helping people in our own ways." Emma looked out at the mountains, thinking. She had spent 2 years building her practice in Rock Springs, establishing herself as a reliable source of medical care. The thought of expanding that, of reaching even more people who needed help, was enticing. And the thought of doing it with Aidan by her side, of building a life with him, made her heart soar. "There is still the question of propriety," she said finally. "I cannot live on a ranch with you unless we are married." "I know," Aidan said. He slid off the bench and, carefully mindful of his healing leg, knelt on one knee before her. From his pocket he drew a ring, simple but beautiful, a gold band set with a small emerald. "Emma Ashford, I came to your clinic broken in body, and you mended me. But it was not just my leg you healed. You showed me that I could be around people again, that I could care about someone without it destroying me. You gave me back my life, and now I want to spend that life with you. Will you marry me?" Emma looked down at this strong, gentle man, this mountain man who had learned to be vulnerable again because of her, and she felt her heart overflow with love. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Aidan Morgan, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms and kissing her soundly. From inside the clinic, Emma heard Mary squeal with delight, and she laughed against Aidan's lips, realizing her assistant had been watching through the window. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church at the edge of Rock Springs. It was a simple ceremony, attended by the people Emma had treated over the years, and the few friends Aidan had made in town. Mary stood as Emma's witness, and one of Aidan's former trapping partners stood as his. Emma wore a dress of pale blue silk that she had brought from Philadelphia, but never had occasion to wear, and Aidan wore new clothes that still looked slightly uncomfortable on his large frame. But when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Aidan kissed her in front of the whole congregation, Emma knew she had never been happier. This was what she had come west to find, though she had not known it at the time. Not just purpose in her work, but love, partnership, a true meeting of minds and hearts with someone who understood her. The wedding celebration was held at the town hall, with food and music and dancing. Emma danced with her new husband, careful of his leg which was still not quite up to the more vigorous reels, and with various miners and townspeople who wanted to congratulate her. It was a joyous affair, and it went late into the night. Finally, as the stars wheeled overhead and the party began to wind down, Aidan took Emma's hand and led her outside. A wagon waited there, already loaded with Emma's belongings and supplies for the clinic. Aidan had been working on the ranch house for the past month, and while it was not completely finished, it was livable enough for them to move in. The ride out to the ranch took several hours in the darkness, but Emma did not mind. She sat close to Aidan on the wagon seat, his arm around her shoulders, and watched the stars. The night air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of sage and pine from the mountains. When they finally arrived, dawn was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky. Emma saw the house Aidan had built, a solid structure of timber and stone, larger than she had expected. It was nestled in a valley with the mountains rising behind it, and she could hear the creek babbling nearby. "It is beautiful," she breathed, taking it all in. "Come inside," Aidan said, helping her down from the wagon. "I want to show you what I have done." The interior of the house was still sparse, furnished with only the basics, but Emma could see the care Aidan had taken with every detail. The main room was large and open, with a stone fireplace at one end. A kitchen area occupied one corner, with a good iron stove and sturdy cabinets. But what caught Emma's attention was the room Aidan led her to off the main living space. "This is for your clinic," he said, opening the door. Inside was a bright, clean room with windows on 2 walls to let in plenty of light. Aidan had built cabinets for supplies and a sturdy table for examinations. There was even a small bed in one corner for patients who might need to stay. "Aidan, this is perfect," Emma said, turning to him with tears in her eyes. "You thought of everything." "I had a good teacher," he said, pulling her close. "I watched you work for months. I saw what you needed. I wanted you to have a space here where you could continue your calling." Emma kissed him deeply, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. Then, Aidan swept her into his arms, mindful but confident now on his fully healed leg, and carried her through to the bedroom where they began their life together as husband and wife. The months that followed were busy ones. Emma split her time between the ranch and Rock Springs, riding into town 3 days a week to see patients at her clinic there. Mary had proven capable of handling minor issues, and there was now a doctor who had moved to town, an older man who was happy to refer the more complex cases to Emma's expertise. At the ranch, Emma found herself treating a whole new population. Ranchers' wives came to her when they were pregnant or ill. Cowboys appeared with injuries from horses or cattle. Homesteaders brought their children when fever struck or accidents happened. Word spread quickly that there was a skilled nurse at the Morgan Ranch, and people came from as far as 50 miles away seeking help. Aidan proved to be an excellent partner in all ways. He built up the ranch steadily, buying cattle and hiring a couple of hands to help manage them. But he always made time to help Emma with her work too, riding out with her to distant homesteads when she had calls, helping her lift patients or hold them steady during treatments. even learning to assist with minor procedures. In the evenings, after the work was done, they would sit together on the porch Aidan had built, looking out at the mountains and talking about their days. Sometimes, Aidan would play the harmonica he had learned as a boy, and Emma would sing along in her clear, sweet voice. It was a simple life, but it was full of love and purpose, exactly what they both needed. One morning, nearly a year after their wedding, Emma woke feeling queasy. She tried to dismiss it as something she had eaten, but when the nausea persisted for several days, she could no longer deny what she knew in her heart. She told Aidan that evening as they sat by the fire. "I am with child," she said simply, watching his face for his reaction. For a moment, Aidan just stared at her. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of glass. "A baby," he whispered. "Emma, we are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" She asked, though she could already see that he was. "Happy?" Aidan pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I thought I had lost any chance at having a family, at being a father. I thought that part of my life had died back in Missouri. And now you incredible woman, you are giving me that chance again. I am more than happy. I am blessed." They held each other for a long time, both overcome with emotion. Emma had not been certain she wanted children, had thought her work might be enough. But now, feeling the tiny life growing inside her, she discovered a new depth of love she had not known existed. The pregnancy was not easy. Emma continued working as long as she could, but the physical demands of her profession became increasingly difficult as her belly grew. She had to reduce her trips into Rock Springs and focus more on patients who could come to the ranch. Aidan became even more protective, constantly worrying about her, trying to get her to rest more. "I am pregnant, not ill," Emma would remind him gently when he fussed too much. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my wife carrying my child," Aidan would counter. "That is a different matter entirely." Despite her reassurances, Emma privately appreciated his concern. She had helped enough women through difficult births to know that childbirth was not without risk, especially out here where medical help might not arrive in time if something went wrong. She made her own preparations carefully, instructing Mary on what to do if complications arose, writing down procedures and remedies. When her time came, on a cold February morning in 1878, it was fast and intense. Aidan rode hard to fetch Mary from town while Emma labored alone, relying on her training to stay calm and focused. By the time Mary arrived, panting from the hard ride, Emma was already close to delivering. "The baby is coming fast," Emma managed between contractions. "Help me to the bed." Mary had assisted with births before under Emma's supervision, and she did not panic now. She helped Emma through the final stages of labor, and when the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, it was Mary who caught him and placed him on Emma's chest. "A boy," Mary said, tears streaming down her face. "Emma, you have a son." Aidan burst through the door at that moment, having heard the baby's cries from outside where he had been pacing frantically. He stopped at the threshold, staring at the sight of his wife holding their newborn son, and Emma saw his face transform with wonder. "Come meet your son," Emma said softly, and Aidan moved forward as if in a dream. He reached out tentatively to touch the baby's tiny hand, and when those miniature fingers wrapped around one of his large calloused ones, Aidan broke down completely. He wept as he had not wept since the war, tears of joy and relief and overwhelming love. They named him Thomas, after Aidan's father who had died in the war, and Andrew after Emma's father back in Philadelphia. Thomas Andrew Morgan, born healthy and strong at 8 pounds, with his father's blue eyes and a head full of dark hair. Those early months with a baby were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Emma had never been more tired in her life, but she had also never experienced such pure joy. Watching Aiden with their son was particularly moving. He was so gentle with Thomas, so patient, singing to him in a deep rumbling voice and carrying him around the ranch to show him the mountains and the animals. Emma continued her work, though necessarily reduced. She saw patients at the ranch when she could, and Mary took on more responsibilities in town. The doctor who had moved to Rock Springs proved to be a good ally, consulting with Emma on difficult cases and referring patients to her when her specialized skills were needed. When Thomas was 6 months old and Emma was starting to feel more like herself again, she and Aiden sat down to discuss the future of the ranch and the clinic. "I have been thinking," Aiden said, bouncing Thomas on his knee, "that we should make this more official. Build a proper clinic here, maybe have Mary move out here to help you full-time. We could serve the whole region, not just people who happen to hear about you." "That would require significant investment," Emma said, though the idea appealed to her. "Building a separate clinic structure, paying Mary properly, buying more supplies." "The ranch is doing well," Aiden said. "Better than I hoped, actually. We can afford it. And I think it would be good not just for the people we would help, but for us too. We could build something that lasts, Emma. A real medical practice that could serve this region for generations." Emma looked at her husband, holding their son so carefully, and felt her heart swell with love. When she had first seen him broken and bleeding on her doorstep 2 years ago, she never could have imagined this future. She had saved his leg, yes, but he had given her so much more. He had given her love, partnership, a family, and now he was helping her expand her life's work in ways she had never dreamed possible. "All right," she agreed. "Let us build something that lasts." Construction on the clinic building began that spring. Aiden designed it himself, incorporating everything Emma needed and more. It would have 3 examination rooms, a larger room for patients who needed overnight care, and a proper surgery with good light and ventilation. There would be storage for medicines and supplies, a separate entrance for emergencies, and living quarters for Mary. The building took shape over the summer, with Aiden and his ranch hands doing much of the work themselves and hiring additional help when needed. Emma supervised, making sure every detail was right, that the windows were positioned for optimal light, that the ventilation was adequate, that there was proper storage for the growing collection of medical supplies she was accumulating. Mary agreed enthusiastically to move out to the ranch. She had proven herself an apt student of medicine, and Emma had been teaching her more advanced techniques. Having her there full-time would allow them to treat more patients and handle more complex cases. By the time autumn arrived and the clinic building was complete, word had spread throughout the region. People came from as far as 80 miles away, homesteaders and ranchers and miners from small camps in the mountains. Emma found herself busier than ever, but also more fulfilled. She was reaching people who had never had access to medical care before, making a real difference in the lives of families scattered across the harsh Wyoming landscape. Thomas grew from a baby into a curious toddler, exploring the ranch with his father, learning the names of the animals and the mountains. Emma would watch them together, Aiden lifting their son onto his shoulders to get a better view of the cattle, or kneeling down to show him how to identify animal tracks, and she would feel such gratitude for the life they had built. One evening, when Thomas was nearly 2 years old, Emma found Aiden standing on the porch, looking out at the mountains in the distance. The sun was setting, painting the peaks in shades of gold and pink, and there was a contemplative expression on his face. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked, coming to stand beside him. About how much has changed, Aiden said, putting his arm around her. 3 years ago, I was alone in those mountains, convinced that was all I deserved, all I could handle. And then I had an accident that I thought might kill me, and instead it brought me to you. Your friends brought you to me, Emma corrected gently. You would have died if they had not gotten you down from the mountains. No, Aiden said, turning to face her. I mean, yes, they brought my body down. But you, Emma, you brought my heart and soul back to life. I was dead in all the ways that matter when I met you. I was just surviving, not living. You taught me I could live again, that I could love again, that I could have a future instead of just a past. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. You did the same for me, she said. I thought my work was enough, that I did not need anything else, but you showed me that I could have both. I could have my calling and have love. I could heal others and heal myself. Aiden cupped her face in his hands, those strong, gentle hands that she had first seen broken and bleeding, now healed and capable of such tenderness. I came to you with a broken leg, he said softly, and you asked if you could mend my heart too without saying a word. The answer, if I had been conscious enough to give it then, would have been yes. Yes, please mend my heart. And you did, Emma. You mended every broken part of me. And you mended me, Emma whispered. I did not even know I was broken until you showed me what being whole could feel like. They kissed as the sun completed its descent behind the mountains, and from inside the house, they could hear Thomas babbling to himself, probably getting into something he should not. It was a perfect moment, ordinary and yet profound, full of the deep contentment that comes from building a life with someone who truly sees you. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The ranch prospered, growing from a modest operation to one of the more successful spreads in the region. The clinic thrived too, with Emma and Mary treating hundreds of patients each year, delivering babies and setting bones and fighting infections. They saved most of the people who came to them, though not all, and Emma grieved each loss even as she celebrated each success. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy with his father's strength and his mother's compassion. He learned the ranch from Aiden and the basics of medicine from Emma, and he seemed equally at home with both. When he was 5, he got a baby sister, Caroline Grace Morgan, who had Emma's green eyes and Aiden's determination. Emma had thought the birth would be easier the second time, knowing what to expect, but it proved more difficult than Thomas's arrival. There was a moment when the bleeding would not stop, when she saw fear in Aiden's eyes and realized she might not survive. But Mary kept her head, applying the techniques Emma had taught her, and eventually the bleeding slowed and stopped. Caroline arrived healthy and Emma recovered, though it took longer than she wanted to admit. No more, Aiden said firmly when she was finally on her feet again. I cannot go through that again, Emma. I cannot risk losing you. 2 children is a good number, Emma agreed, still weak but alive, holding her daughter close. One of each, healthy and strong. We are blessed. As the children grew, the ranch grew with them. Aiden built on additional rooms, expanding the house to accommodate their growing family. He built a school room where Emma taught Thomas and Caroline their letters and numbers, and where traveling teachers would sometimes stay to educate the children of the outlying ranches. The clinic continued to expand too. Emma trained Mary so thoroughly that she could handle most cases independently, and together they trained 2 more young women who came seeking to learn the healing arts. The clinic at Morgan Ranch became known throughout Wyoming Territory as a place where you could receive excellent care regardless of your ability to pay. Emma never forgot the principles that had brought her west. She treated everyone who came to her, rich or poor, respected or outcast. She delivered babies for ranchers' wives in comfortable homes and for prostitutes from the mining camps. She set bones for wealthy merchants and for dirt-poor homesteaders. She made no distinctions, and her reputation for both skill and compassion spread far and wide. Aiden supported her work completely, even when it meant she was gone for days at a time attending a difficult birth or an epidemic in a distant settlement. He understood that her calling was as important to her as breathing, and he never asked her to choose between her family and her work. Instead, he made it possible for her to have both, managing the ranch and caring for the children when she had to be away, never complaining, always proud of what she accomplished. When Wyoming became a state in 1890 with full voting rights for women, Emma and Aiden celebrated together. It felt like a vindication of everything Emma had fought for, proof that women's contributions to society were finally being recognized. She cast her first vote that November with tears of joy in her eyes, and Aiden stood beside her, holding Caroline's hand while Thomas waited his turn to watch democracy in action. The years passed, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the never-ending work of the clinic. Thomas grew into a young man who chose to study medicine, eventually traveling to Denver to attend medical school. Caroline became a skilled horsewoman and rancher, taking over more of the ranch operations as Aiden aged. Both children thrived, secure in the love of their parents and the purpose that infused their home. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Aiden took Emma back to the spot where the clinic had first stood in Rock Springs. The building was still there, now run by Thomas, who had returned after medical school to take over his mother's practice in town, while Emma and Mary continued to run the clinic at the ranch. "You remember the first time you saw me?" Aiden asked, standing outside the building where it had all begun. "How could I forget?" Emma said, taking his hand. "You were bleeding all over my doorstep, unconscious and broken. I was certain you would lose the leg." "I was certain I would die," Aiden said, "and maybe part of me wanted to. It would have been easier than facing another day alone, but you would not let me give up. You fought for me when I could not fight for myself." "That is what healers do," Emma said simply. "No," Aiden corrected, turning to face her. "That is what you do, Emma. You see broken things and you cannot rest until you have mended them. You saw my broken leg, yes, but you also saw my broken heart, my broken spirit, and you mended them all." Emma looked up at the man she loved, seeing the gray in his beard now, the lines around his eyes. But she also saw the same blue eyes that had first looked at her with such gratitude and growing love all those years ago. He was older now, they both were, but the love between them had only deepened with time. "You asked me once if I would mend hearts," Emma said softly. "I thought it was just a poetic way of speaking, but you were asking for real, were you not?" "I was," Aiden confirmed. "I had spent 5 years protecting my heart, keeping it frozen and safe in the mountains. And then you thawed it, you healed it, you made it capable of love again. You gave me back my life, Emma. Everything I am, everything we have built together, it all started because you refused to let me die." "We built it together," Emma insisted. "You gave me just as much as I gave you. You showed me that I could have a full life, not just a useful one. You gave me love and partnership and a family. You supported my work when other men would have demanded I give it up. You made all of this possible." They stood together in the dusty street of Rock Springs. Two people who had found each other through providence and pain, who had chosen each other every day since, who had built a life of meaning and purpose together. Around them, the town bustled with activity, miners and merchants and families going about their business, many of them people Emma had treated over the years, people who were alive and healthy because of her skill and dedication. 20 years, Aiden said, putting his arm around her. "And I love you more now than I did when we married." "How is that possible?" "Because love grows," Emma said, leaning into him. "Because we water it with kindness and attention. Because we choose it every single day." They walked back to where their wagon waited, ready to return to the ranch where Mary would be managing the clinic, where Caroline was probably working with the cattle, where their home waited for them. As they drove out of town toward the mountains, Emma reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them here. She had come west seeking purpose, wanting to help people who had no one else. She had found that purpose, yes, but so much more besides. She had found love with a man who had been just as lost as she was. She had found partnership with someone who saw her as an equal. She had found a way to have both the work she loved and the family she had not known she wanted. And it had all started with a mountain man broken and bleeding on her doorstep, asking without words if she would mend not just his leg but his heart too. The answer had been yes, then and every day since. Yes, she would mend him. Yes, she would love him. Yes, she would build a life with him. Yes to all of it, to the hard work and the joy, the struggles and the triumphs, the ordinary days and the extraordinary moments. They spent the rest of their years together at the ranch, growing old side by side. The clinic continued to operate, with Thomas and Mary and the other nurses Emma had trained carrying on her work. Caroline married a good man and brought her own children to the ranch, another generation to love the land and the mountains as their grandfather did. Emma continued to practice medicine well into her 60s, though she focused more on training others and consulting on difficult cases rather than the day-to-day work. Aidan remained active on the ranch, though he finally hired a foreman to handle the heavy work. They spent their evenings on the porch they had shared for so many years, watching the sun set behind the mountains, holding hands, counting their blessings. When Aidan passed away at the age of 73, it was peacefully in his sleep with Emma beside him. He had lived a full life, far longer and richer than he had ever imagined possible during those dark years alone in the mountains. His last words to Emma were the same as his first conscious words to her all those years ago. "Thank you." Emma grieved him deeply, but without regret. They had had 45 years together, years filled with love and purpose and meaning. She continued her work for 5 more years after his death, training the next generation of healers, ensuring that the clinic would continue long after she was gone. When she finally joined Aidan in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch, she left behind a legacy that touched countless lives. Hundreds of people owed their lives to her skill. Dozens of women had learned the healing arts from her. Her children and grandchildren carried on both the ranch and the medical practice, keeping alive the values she and Aidan had built their life around: hard work, compassion, service to others, and love. On her gravestone, Thomas had inscribed simply, "Emma Ashford Morgan, Healer." She mended bodies and hearts. Next to her, Aidan Stone read, "Aidan Morgan, mountain man and rancher. She gave him back his life, he gave her his heart." It was a fitting epitaph for two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful from broken pieces, who had proven that love could heal even the deepest wounds. Their story became legend in Wyoming, passed down through generations, a testament to the power of compassion, determination, and love in the wild, harsh, beautiful landscape of the American West. The clinic at Morgan Ranch operated for another 50 years, finally closing only when modern hospitals made such remote facilities unnecessary. But the house remained in the family, passed down through the generations, still standing strong against the Wyoming weather, still looking out at the mountains where Aidan had once sought solitude and found instead the path that led him to Emma. And on quiet evenings, when the light falls just right and the wind whispers through the pines, Locals swear you can still see two figures on that old porch, sitting close together, holding hands, watching the sunset behind the mountains they both loved so well. A mountain man and a nurse, brought together by accident and providence, who chose each other every day and built a love story for the ages.